It was a crisp autumn morning when John Carter first laid eyes on the sprawling 10-acre property that would become Green Valley Farm. After 35 years of working as a software engineer in the bustling city of Chicago, John had finally decided to retire and pursue his lifelong dream of owning a farm. The property, nestled just outside the small town of Willow Creek, was everything he had ever wanted: rolling hills, a small pond, and a charming old barn that just needed a little TLC. John had done his homework. He had checked the zoning laws, reviewed the HOA documents, and even consulted with local farmers to ensure that his dream was feasible. The HOA, known as the Willow Creek Community Association, had specific pro-VY signs that supported small-scale agriculture and livestock. It was one of the reasons John had chosen this community. He wanted to create a place where families could come to learn about sustainable farming, where children could interact with animals, and where the community could come together. With his retirement NJS, John purchased the property and began the arduous task of transforming it into a working farm. He repaired the barn, built sturdy fences, and installed a state-of-the-art irrigation system. He started small, with a few chickens and a couple of goats, but soon expanded to include a pair of therapy horses that had been rescued from a nearby facility that had lost funding. The horses, named Daisy and Duke, quickly became the heart of the farm, providing therapeutic rides for children with disabilities. The community embraced Green Valley Farm with open arms. Local families would sit on weekends, bringing their children to pet the animals and collect fresh eggs. The elementary school even started organizing field trips to the farm, where kids could learn about where their food came from and the importance of sustainable agriculture. John's wife, Mary, often joked that he smiled more now than he had in the past 20 years. Everything was perfect until Linda Harper moved in. Linda Harper was not your typical Willow Creek resident. She arrived in a sleek black SUV, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, and immediately began making her presence known. She had purchased one of the largest homes in the community, a modern mansion that stood in stark contrast to the rustic charm of Green Valley Farm. John first met Linda at the annual Willow Creek Community Barbecue, an event he hosted every year to thank his neighbors for their support. Linda's arrival was impossible to miss. She parked her SUV in the middle of the driveway, stepped out in a tailored suit, and immediately began surveying the farm with a look of disdain. "Are those farm animals?" she asked, her voice dripping with incredulity. "In this community?" John forced a smile and extended his hand. "Welcome to Green Valley Farm. I'm John Carter." Linda ignored his hand and instead pointed to the horses grazing in the distance. "Do you realize how much noise those animals make? And the smell? This is supposed to be a prestigious community, not some rural backwater." John's smile faltered, but he maintained his composure. "The HOA bylaws specifically allow for small-scale agriculture. This farm has been here for years, and the community loves it." Linda scoffed. "Well, things are about to change." Within weeks of her arrival, Linda launched an aggressive campaign to become the president of the Willow Creek Community Association. Her slogan, "Modernizing Willow Creek for the Future." Fancy flyers began appearing in everyone's mailboxes, touting the importance of property values and contemporary community standards. There was no mention of the farms that had been a part of Willow Creek for generations. Linda's campaign was well-funded and meticulously organized. She hosted VYSH parties at her mansion, inviting influential members of the community and subtly pushing her agenda. She spoke of progress and development, painting Green Valley Farm as an outdated relic that was holding the community back. John tried to ignore the growing tension, but it was impossible. Anonymous complaint letters began appearing in his mailbox, accusing him of violating HOA rules. The complaints ranged from noise disturbances to unsanitary conditions, all of which were completely fabricated. Green Valley Farm had passed every inspection with flying colors, but the damage to John's reputation was already being done. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. The meeting was called with little notice, and most residents didn't even know it was happening. John only found out because a neighbor, Tom, tipped him off. When John arrived at the community center, he was met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. Linda stood at the front of the room, flanked by a group of men in suits. She was holding a stack of documents and speaking in a tone that brooked no argument. "As your newly elected HOA president," she declared, "it is my duty to ensure that Willow Creek remains a prestigious and desirable community. Unfortunately, there are elements within our community that are holding us back." She turned to John, her eyes narrowing. "Mr. Carter, your so-called farm is a blight on this community. The noise, the smell, the unsightly structure sits all unacceptable. I'm GIVYing you 24 hours to remove your animals and cease all agricultural active VY ties." The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief. John stood up, his heart pounding. "Linda, you can't just waltz in here and change the rules. This farm is fully compliant with HOA bylaws and county zoning laws. You have no authority to shut it down." Linda smirked. "Oh, but I do. And if you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to take legal action." John's mind raced. He knew he was in for a fight, but he also knew he couldn't back down. Green Valley Farm wasn't just his Drea Mitt, was a VY Tal part of the community. After the meeting, John reached out to a lawyer named Sarah Mitchell, who specialized in agricultural zoning and HOA disputes. Sarah listened intently as John recounted the events of the past few weeks. "This isn't the first time I've heard of Linda Harper," Sarah said, her expression grim. "She's been involved in similar schemes in other communities. She targets small farms and family businesses, harasses them until they're forced to sell, and then works with developers to turn the land into luxury, sub-VY science." John's stomach churned. "So, this isn't just about me. She's done this before." Sarah nodded. "And she's good at it. But if we can gather enough EVY Denke, we might be able to stop her." Together, John and Sarah began digging into Linda's past. They discovered that she had served on multiple HOA boards in different counties, each time Leah VY-ing under mysterious circumstances. In every case, small farms and family businesses have been forced out, replaced by cookie-cutter housing developments. But the real breakthrough came when they uncovered a series of emails between Linda and a local zoning official. The emails revealed a coordinated effort to change agricultural zoning laws, making it easier for developers to buy up farmland. Linda was VYing kickbacks from every property sale, and she had even created fake and VY environmental studies to justify her actions. Armed with this EVY Denke, John and Sarah prepared to confront Linda at the next HOA meeting. They coordinated with other VY teams of Linda's schemes, gathering testimonies and documents that painted a damning picture of her corruption. The meeting was packed. Linda stood at the front of the room, confident as ever, ready to push through new regulations that would effectively ban all agricultural active VY ties in Willow Creek. But before she could begin, John stood up. "Before we vote on any new regulations," he said, his voice steady, "I think everyone needs to see exactly what kind of progress Linda Harper is really pushing for." He nodded to Sarah, who activated the projector. The screen lit up with a series of documents, emails, and photos that exposed Linda's scheme in VYVYD detail. The room fell silent as the EVY Denke unfolded bank transfers, coded emails, and even recordings of Linda discussing her plans with developers. Linda's face turned pale. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "These documents are fake. This is a witch hunt." But the room was no longer on her side. One by one, residents stood up to share their own stories of harassment and intimidation. The tide had turned. The fallout was swift and decisive. Linda was arrested on charges of real estate fraud, conspiracy, and corruption of public officials. The FBI launched a full-scale investigation into her active VY ties, uncovering a network of corrupt officials and developers who had been working together to exploit small communities. In the wake of Linda's arrest, the Willow Creek Community Association underwent a complete overhaul. Sarah Mitchell was elected as the new president, and she worked with John and other residents to draft the Community Heritage Protection Act, a groundbreaking charter that protected small farms and family businesses from predatory development schemes. Green Valley Farm became a symbol of resistance against corporate greed and corruption. The community rallied around John, and the farm thrived like never before. The therapy horses, Daisy and Duke, continued to bring joy to children, and the farm became a hub for sustainable agriculture education. As for Linda, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her mansion was seized by the courts and turned into a community center, with part of the land becoming a teaching garden for local schools. John often reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. It had been a long and difficult fight, but it had been worth it. Green Valley Farm wasn't just a piece of land, it was a way of life. And sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about protecting your own dream. It's about protecting the dreams of everyone who comes after you. Years later, Green Valley Farm is still going strong. The community has grown, but the values that John fought so hard to protect remain intact. The farm continues to host field trips, therapy sessions, and community events, serving as a reminder of what can be achieved when people come together to stand up for what's right. John often walks through the fields in the early morning, watching the sun rise over the hills. He thinks about Linda Harper and the battle that almost cost him everything. But he also thinks about the families who sit the farm, the children who laugh as they feed the goats, and the community that has become his family. Sometimes, the easy path isn't the right one. Sometimes you have to stand your ground not just for yourself, but for everyone who might come after you. And sometimes, the strongest communities are built by people who refuse to be pushed around. The animals are still here. The kids are still learning. And the community is stronger than ever. And that's worth fighting for every single time. The story of Green Valley Farm and the downfall of Linda Harper didn't just stay within the confines of Willow Creek. News of the community's story spread like wildfire, thanks in part to the rallied live stream of the HOA meeting where Linda's corruption was exposed. National media outlets picked up the story, and soon, John Carter and Green Valley Farm became symbols of grassroots resistance against predatory development and corporate greed. John found himself inundated with EW requests. He appeared on morning talk shows, podcasts, and even a documentary that chronicled the fight to save Green Valley Farm. Each time, he emphasized the importance of community and the need to stand up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. But the impact went far beyond media attention. Inspired by Willow Creek's success, other communities across the country began to take action. HOAs that had once been dominated by developers and corrupt officials were now being challenged by residents who refused to let their neighborhoods be turned into soulless science. The Community Heritage Protection Act, drafted by Sarah Mitchell and the new HOA board, became a model for other towns looking to protect their small farms and family businesses. In one particularly poignant case, a family in Oregon who had lost their generational apple orchard to a similar scheme managed to reclaim their land after citing Willow Creek's story as precedent. They reached out to John, thanking him for giving them the courage to fight back. "Your story gave us hope," the father of the family said during a phone call. "We thought we were alone in this, but now we know we're part of something bigger." Just when it seemed like the battle was over, a new challenge emerged. A large development corporation, Valley View Estates, began quietly purchasing properties on the outskirts of Willow Creek. At first, it seemed harmless, just a few empty lots being sold to a company looking to build affordable housing. But John's instincts told him something was off. He reached out to Sarah Mitchell, who had become a close friend and ally in the fight to protect Willow Creek. Together, they began investigating Valley View Estates. What they found was alarming. The company had ties to some of the same developers Linda Harper had worked with, and they were using shell companies to hide their true intentions. "They're trying to do what Linda failed to do," Sarah said during a late-night meeting at John's farmhouse. "They're buying up land piece by piece, hoping to eventually surround Willow Creek and force us to sell." John clenched his fists. "We can't let that happen. Not after everything we've been through." This time, the fight wasn't just John's, it was the entire community's. Residents of Willow Creek organized town hall meetings, formed committees, and even launched a crowdfunding campaign to buy back the properties Valley View Estates had acquired. The sense of unity was palpable. People who had once been DVY dead by petty HOA disputes now stood shoulder to shoulder, determined to protect their way of life. John and Sarah worked tirelessly, using the lessons they had learned from their battle with Linda Harper. They reached out to other communities that had faced similar threats, forming a network of active VYSTS and legal experts who shared resources and strategies. The movement grew, and soon, Valley View Estates found itself under intense scrutiny. The company's shady practices were exposed in a series of investigative reports, and public pressure forced them to abandon their plans. The properties they had purchased were sold back to the community at fair prices, and Willow Creek was once again safe. Years passed, and Green Valley Farm continued to thrive. John and Mary expanded the farm, adding a community garden and a small educational center where VY-siders could learn about sustainable agriculture and animal care. The therapy horses, Daisy and Duke, were joined by a few new rescues, including a gentle donkey named Buddy, who quickly became a favorite among the children. The farm became more than just a place; it became a symbol of resilience and hope. Schools from across the state organized field trips to Green Valley Farm, and John often gave talks about the importance of standing up for what you believe in. He even wrote a book titled The Last Stand of Green Valley, which became a bestseller and inspired countless others to fight for their communities. One day, as John was GIVYing a tour to a group of school children, a little girl tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Carter," she said, her eyes wide with wonder, "is it true that you saved this farm from a bad lady who wanted to tear it down?" John knelt down to her level and smiled. "It's true," he said, "but I didn't do it alone. It took all of us, the whole community, to stand up and say, this is our home, and we're not going to let anyone take it away from us." The little girl nodded solemnly. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she said. John's heart swelled with pride. "You can be," he replied, "and you'll have your own community to stand with you." As John grew older, he began to think about the future of Green Valley Farm. He and Mary had no children of their own, but the farm had become a part of so many lives that he knew it would live on long after he was gone. He worked with Sarah and the HOA to establish a trust that would ensure the farm remained a community resource for generations to come. One crisp autumn morning, much like the day he had first seen the property, John stood at the edge of the fields, watching the sun rise over the hills. The farm was alive with active VY children laughing as they fed the goats, volunteers tending to the garden, and Daisy and Duke grazing peacefully in the distance. Mary joined him, slipping her hand into his. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said. John nodded. "It's more than I ever dreamed of." They stood there in silence for a moment, taking in the sight of the farm they had built together. It wasn't just a piece of land, it was a testament to the power of community, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the enduring strength of hope. Green Valley Farm continues to thrive, a levying reminder of what can be achieved when people come together to protect their way of life. The Community Heritage Protection Act has been adopted by towns across the country, and the story of Willow Creek's fight against corruption has inspired countless others to stand up for their communities. John and Mary still live on the farm, though they've taken a step back from the day-to-day operations. They spend their days enjoying the fruits of their labor, watching as new generations of children learn about sustainable farming and the importance of community. As for Linda Harper, she served her time in prison and was released on parole. She moved to a small town far from Willow Creek, where she lives a quiet life, far removed from the world of real estate development. Some say she's changed, but others believe she's simply biding her time. Whatever the case, she's no longer a threat to Green Valley Farm or the community it represents. The farm's legacy lives on, not just in the fields and barns, but in the hearts of everyone who's been touched by its story. It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest VY stories, and that the seeds of change can grow into something truly extraordinary. And so, as the sun sets over Green Valley Farm, casting a golden glow over the fields, John Carter smiles. He knows that the fight was worth it not just for himself, but for everyone who believes in the power of community, the importance of standing your ground, and the enduring strength of hope. The animals are still here. The kids are still learning. And the community is stronger than ever. And that's worth fighting for every single time. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.